I asked your husband earlier about the various phases of treatment and asked him to describe motivation. And I asked him, I showed him some pictures of motivation and asked him if it accurately described what motivation was. Before I show you the pictures, can you tell us what motivation was or is?
You're not going to get me to demonstrate it. Now, it's kids wanting to get called on.
Well, let me interrupt you for a second. Why would it be upsetting to you if I did ask you to demonstrate it?
I would be uncomfortable doing it because I'm a shy person and I'm not in group and I don't want to be called on. I don't want to be questioned.
Do you think it was upsetting to the patients, the kids, to motivate?
No, it was framed positively. Okay. Probably the ones that didn't complete would tell you it was horrendous and horrible and terrible. That would be my guess.
Okay. We're going to show it in a minute, but could you explain what it was?
It was just getting the kids to be active physically, to be called on, to relate in a rap, to get called on, and it was framed as a positive thing to get on with their getting well.
Okay, let me see if I can do this correctly. I'm going to ask you to look at this. I'm going to ask you if it shows what motivation was, and I'm going to pause it at one point to focus on a couple of particular kids. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm doing this badly again. All right. First, does the video you've just seen accurately depict motivation?
No, sometimes it got more wild than that.
Okay, sometimes it was more wild than that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one, I think when we were looking at the boys' side motivating, there was one young man with his back to the camera who was sitting there not doing anything. He just seemed to be sitting still, minding his own business. And in this picture, let's see if I can start it and then quickly pause it. The second young lady in from the right seems to be sitting still as well and not motivating. Let's just take a look quickly.
This one?
Yes. Did you see what I was referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can get back and focus on her one more time. When I show it to you again, you'll see the young man who's sitting and not motivating. Yes, that young man. Mm-hmm. And now we move to the girl's side, and there's one young woman who seems to be sitting there herself.
Correct.
Okay. With respect to that young woman, am I correct that if she sits there like that, she's not going to get called on to relate in group?
True.
And if she's in the first phase of treatment, if she doesn't get called on to relate in group, she's not going to earn talk, assuming she doesn't have talk, or progress in her treatment. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And therefore, one had to motivate in order for one to progress in treatment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, let's assume that that young lady, with her back to us, not only doesn't motivate, but also begins to look at the ceiling or down at the floor. If she did that, she would be violating one of the rules of kids, would she not?
Paying attention.
Right. And paying attention to the person who's talking. Is that correct?
Correct.
The rule of kids, in fact, required her to actually pay attention to the person that was talking. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if she was not paying attention to the person who was talking, would it be accurate to say that the person sitting next to her was supposed to or had the right to do something about it?
Sure. Encourage her. Tell her to sit up.
And how would the person next to her encourage her to do that?
Well, obviously you've been told something else, but
Now, why don't you tell me what they actually were supposed to do?
What they were supposed to do is just gently nudge them and say, come on, encourage them to get involved.
Okay. And the person that was supposed to gently nudge them and encourage them to get involved was often a first phase patient themselves.
Who was working?
Is that correct?
Yes.
And a first phase patient who was there because of their out of control behavior.
Yes.
Is that
but
correct?
Who was involved and choosing to be involved.
Okay. And if the person, let's just talk about the young lady with the back to us, after they get gently nudged or tapped and encouraged to stay involved, says, stop, leave me alone. Just want to be left alone. And continues to look at the ceiling or look down at the floor and sit there, minding their own business. What was the person next to her supposed to do then?
Ignore them.
Well, weren't they
Unless the staff told them otherwise.
weren't they still violating the rule to pay
Yeah.
attention to the person who's talking?
Yeah, but
Well,
so
if they nudge them again a second time, and the person who was being nudged pushed their arm away,
then they would be restrained.
okay, because they would be breaking the program rule, no violent behavior. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And they would then be restrained by and the restraints would be applied by other patients in treatment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Under the supervision of somebody on the staff. Is that right?
Right.
And they would remain on the floor, restrained, until they agreed to comply with the program rules.
Correct.
Is that correct? And what that meant was they would stay on the floor for a half an hour, 2 hours, or however long it took, until they agreed to sit in that chair with their feet on the floor, paying attention to the person that was talking. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes, or not get involved and leave everybody around them alone. They can do that, as long as they're not slouching and whatever.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by not get involved.
They can just sit there and not strike out at people. After they're not encouraged the whole rap. That would cause the two old comers next to them or the other kids who are working to be distracted by them.
Well,
Any staff who was doing their job would tell them to leave them alone, as long as they were sitting up.
all right, let's just look at the rest of this and we'll